right, everybody, welcome again to another exciting episode of the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. I'm your host and moderator, Cypher here. And today we have a ton of things that we need to cover because lots of stuff is happening all across the political spectrum, and some exciting things and some not so exciting things are also going down. I'm going to give it another minute, maybe another 30 seconds or so, just to allow people to come in before I get started. Little update about things that are going on with us. This charity stream is still going on. It's going to be going on July 31st to August 1st, 11 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Saturday to Sunday. Lots of good things going to come from that, hopefully. And and one of the things I want to announce is that if we do meet our goals during that charity stream, I will shave for the next news roundup after that. So that will be, so if we meet those goals, I'm going to shave my beard and go back in time about 10 years in age, and you'll be able to see that on August 12th. I'm actually not going to be in town on August 5th, so it'll be on August 12th is when you'll be able to see that. So yeah, it'll be a good time. All that stuff. If you want to join on the news roundup today, we are open for call-ins using the Discord, so just go ahead and drop into the Discord. Links are present on YouTube. I think it's up in the right hand corner and over onto the side for Twitch. Just go ahead and join the Discord if you want. Just drop the community links in there as well, so you can go ahead and join me in the Discord if you're wanting to talk. What's going on with my computer? Something's going on with my computer lately too. I need to, like, it's trying to reinstall Spotify for some reason. Right, let's go ahead and start it. So, what are we going to cover today? I think it would be good if we covered some additional COVID updates going around the world and in the United States. And one of those updates is that we've actually, as of today, are reporting that the COVID Lambda variant is confirmed to be in the US out of Houston. Now, the Lambda variant is a variant of COVID that was primarily located in South America. Was in Peru. First time. Peru. So it's first identified in Peru of 2020, and it has now come to the United States. However, while this is a new variant to the US, it doesn't seem, there is no reason right now to believe that that variant is more dangerous than the Delta variant. So it's something that we have to report on because it is developing and it's new with COVID. However, I wouldn't be totally worried about it since there's no reason to believe that it is more dangerous or less, or the vaccines are less effective against it than any of the other variants that exist in the exist globally. Right. Am I coming through okay too? I don't know who's all watching. Yeah. All right. What else is going on in the world of COVID? Well, we have some sad news with COVID in terms of the rise of breakthrough infections. Now, with a breakthrough infection, that means that it was a person that was vaccinated against it and that they have actually gotten sick and still infected with COVID. You've been paying attention to some of the news coming out of Texas with the Texas legislature. 50 or so Democrats have traveled to DC. A lot of 6 or 7 of them have also contracted COVID, and every single one of those members has been vaccinated. So let us go ahead and pull up a news article to cover this from the Associated Press. Right. Okay, Reports of athletes, lawmakers, and others getting the coronavirus despite vaccinations may sound alarming, but top health experts point to overwhelming evidence that the shots are doing exactly what they are supposed to, dramatically reducing severe illness and death. The best indicator, U.S. hospitals and deaths are nearly all among the unvaccinated, and real-world data from Britain and Israel support that protection against the worst cases remains strong. What scientists call breakthrough infections in people who are fully vaccinated make up a small fraction of cases. When you hear about a breakthrough infection, that doesn't necessarily mean the vaccine is failing. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the U.S. government top infectious disease specialist, told a worried Senate panel this week. The shots are holding up, he said, even in the face of highly contagious Delta variant that is burning through unvaccinated communities. Health authorities have warned that even though the COVID-19 vaccines are incredibly effective, the Pfizer and Moderna ones, about 90% against symptomatic infections in studies, they're not perfect. No vaccine. But it wasn't until the Delta variant began spreading that the risk of breakthrough started getting much public attention. The barrage of headlines is disconcerting for vaccinated people wondering how to balance getting back to normal with more exposure to unvaccinated strangers, especially if they have vulnerable family members, such as children too young to qualify for the shots. So to reiterate, anybody that's 12 years or older is able to get the COVID vaccines, any of the COVID vaccines that exist that are available in the United States, that those 12 and younger are not able to get the vaccine because there needs to be more studies because child medicine is more complicated than adult medicine. Sports fans are seeing daily reports about infected athletes, from the New York Yankees to the Summer Olympics. The games soon to start. Tara Ecker, a member of the U.S. women's gymnastics team who said she was vaccinated, tested positive in a training camp just outside of Tokyo. WNBA player Katie Lou pulled out of the Olympics in the 3-on-3 basketball competition after testing positive despite being vaccinated. And politicians in the nation's capital are being rattled by reports of breakthrough cases, including from a congressman, Florida Republican Vern Cannon, some Texas Democratic lawmakers visiting Washington as a political protest, at least 2 people in the White House, and several congressional staffers. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said Wednesday that with 2,000 people on the White House campus each day, some breakthrough cases are inevitable. But the administration will release information if doctors determine any staffer had close contact with the president, vice president, or spouses. One critical question about breakthrough cases is whether the person actually had symptoms. Dr. Francis Collins, director of the National Institute of Health, told the Associated Press. Or is this somebody just being sampled out of an abundance of caution because they had to go to some place like the Congress, he added. Indeed, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has said for months that vaccinated people don't need to get tested after virus exposure unless they develop symptoms. The agency cites limited evidence that they're less likely to infect others than vaccinated. The agency cites limited evidence that they are less likely to infect others than unvaccinated people who get an asymptomatic infection. But different places have different rules. In Britain, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who survived COVID-19 earlier in the pandemic and now is fully vaccinated, began quarantining over the weekend after contact with someone experiencing mild symptoms of breakthrough infection. So what the story is basically saying is that despite the prevalence of high-profile individuals and the like experiencing COVID symptoms or, in fact, getting COVID after being vaccinated, the vaccines themselves appear to be doing their job very, very well, despite the fact that these people are getting COVID and they're experiencing mild symptoms, and there is no evidence yet to suggest that vaccinated people who do get COVID will also suffer from what they call, quote unquote, long COVID. So as far as this is concerned, I think that what we are seeing here is just, the kind of news media sensationalism that is generally the case when it comes to, I don't want that transition, generally is the case of infections and news picking up on the most sensational or the most troubling kind of news that they can in order to report it to people because people are interested in that kind of news. I, for one, am fully vaccinated. I suggest that everyone gets fully vaccinated, or whatever the case may be, because we are seeing throughout the United States a rash of increased infection rates in states that have low vaccination rates. Now, these states are, as one can expect, bifurcated based on whether or not they were Republican. There are primarily Republican states or primarily Democratic states. And one of those, that's something else that we should read a small story about as well. So, COVID, anti-vaccines, how Republican hesitancy From the Washington Post is what we're going to read from today for this one. So let's go ahead and click on over. So most American adults live in blue states. Most unvaccinated adults live in red ones. During a news conference Friday, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Director Rochelle P. Walensky offered a pointed bit of context for the recent increase in coronavirus cases in the United States. This is becoming a pandemic of the unvaccinated. We are seeing outbreaks of cases in parts of the country that have low unvaccinated coverage because unvaccinated people are at risk, and communities that are fully vaccinated are generally faring well. What's interesting about the framing is how it inverts the way in which we've usually looked at uptake of vaccines. Instead of considering how many Americans have been vaccinated, in other words, it asks us to look at how many haven't. That's in keeping with the recent news reports. Mirror Walensky's point. News reports showing that those being hospitalized or dying of COVID-19, the disease caused by the virus, are overwhelmingly unvaccinated. In Los Angeles County, for example, every person hospitalized with COVID-19 Friday was not fully vaccinated. While California has a relatively high rate of vaccinations, 63% of the population has received at least one dose of a vaccine, compared with 58% of the country overall, it is nonetheless home to more unvaccinated people than any other state by virtue of its size. According to the most recent CDC data, California has 14.7 million unvaccinated residents, 7.3 million of whom are adults. While that's a big decline since the beginning of the year, it's still more than any other state. Here's what that decline looks like. So this chart, you can basically see that you have a precipitous unvaccinated resident drop off, and then it starts to level out going to July. So you can see it kind of going like this. And what we know due to vaccine hesitancy and people, think then many people not taking COVID seriously still, despite the fact that we know that there's been 600,000 plus Americans dead from this virus, is that you have this inflection point where they are going to plateau and it will just kind of go off. The 2 points highlighted in the graph, the first point A shows a comparison of the third and fourth ranked states in terms of unvaccinated populations. Florida has more unvaccinated people than any other state save California and Texas, and New York is just behind Florida. But notice how close the red and blue lines are at point A, but how they grow wider apart. New York is seeing a faster decrease in its unvaccinated population than Florida. Florida is also home to 1 in 5 new coronavirus infections over the past week. This means that out of every single coronavirus positive test that has happened in a country, a full 20% of them are coming out of just California. Point B shows that the same pattern plays out among adults. According to the Census Bureau, there are 9 million more adults in California than Texas, but because California has been doing a better job vaccinating its population, there are now more unvaccinated adults in Texas than in California. You notice that I covered the lines for each state by how it voted in the 2020 presidential election. Repeatedly point out the states that voted for President Biden, blue states, have seen higher rates of vaccination than states that voted for Trump. New York and California are seeing faster drops in their unvaccinated populations than Texas and Florida reflect. So let's scroll back up here. So as you can see, this is Florida and New York here. Florida's going down, New York is going down, but New York is going down faster than Florida is. Florida's like plateauing a little bit, like right here, whereas it's still seems to be on a general downtrend here going into July for me. But we can look at this at a macro level as well. The same patterns are seen in points A and B holds across all 50 states and DC. There are essentially as many unvaccinated people in blue states as red ones, despite blue states being home to tens of millions more people. There are now more unvaccinated adults in red states and have been for more than a month. Again, so this is just the data behind, and I love data. I'm a data scientist by trade. So this is just the data behind all the numbers that we've been hearing out of the news media for the last week or so about how Republican states that have Republican states and Republicans in general that have not taken the virus as seriously as maybe some liberals have on average. Of course, I don't like to broad brush completely. You know, I think it's like 30% of Republicans or 30 or 40% of Republicans don't take it seriously. So the majority of Republicans do. But you're seeing this this trend appear where we all kind of knew it would be. We can look at this another way. If we rank each state by month, you can see that red states are often rising in ranks of unvaccinated residents, which is bad, as blue states often fall. Ohio had the 7th most unvaccinated residents in February. Now it's in 5th place. There were 7 red states in the top 20 months ago. Now there are 10. So this is just going to show you that because most people live in major metropolitan areas, and most Republicans, whereas most Republicans live in the Midwest and South, which is more rural and less population density, so that you're seeing that those states are rising to the top of unvaccinated numbers. And no, I don't know why I did that. No quotes. Rising to the top in unvaccinated numbers in a raw format. So in a raw format. And, you know, this is just going to make it to where you're going to see on a per capita basis where Republican states are uptaking the vaccine. Hearing about it in my area, Williamson County, Tennessee, one of the wealthiest areas in the nation, and almost all conservatives. 293 cases and 2 deaths last week. No source besides the neighbor on this. That's probably true. We're seeing like I said in previously, we're seeing a very much more. We're seeing a lot more cases of low vaccination rates within these Republican areas. So that tracks with the kind of information that I've been just going over, and I think I am actually done with that particular article. Just closing out some articles. So space. So that's what's going on with the vaccination rates. And then there was a video, actually, I want to kind of play it, see if I can find it on YouTube. This is something I should have done beforehand, where Sean Hannity, if I can find it real quick. I believe in the science of vaccination. So yes, this is Sean Hannity via the Hill, coming from the Hill on YouTube. I'll get it over here in a second. We're going to play the actual video. No, probably because it's proprietary. Let me see if I can find it on Twitter. Well, regardless of which, Sean Hannity has now since come out in support of getting vaccinated after spending months upon months of downplaying the severity of COVID and all that, and also the efficacy of the vaccines and what have you from there. And while Tucker Carlson, on the other hand, has actually doubled down on saying that, you know, vaccines aren't necessary, don't force me to get the jab, whatever, and that sort of thing. But I want to get the actual video if I can. So let's see, Sean Hannity. Here we go. This is it. Please take COVID. Yes, I found it on Twitter.
Please take COVID.
Go Twitter. All right, let me see if I can get this on here. There we go.
Just like we've been saying, please take COVID seriously. I can't say it enough. Enough people have died. We don't need any more death. Research like crazy. Talk to your doctor, your doctors, medical professionals you trust based on your unique medical history, your current medical condition, and you and your doctor make a very important decision for your own safety. Take it seriously. You also have a right to medical privacy. Doctor-patient confidentiality is also important, and it absolutely makes sense for many Americans to get vaccinated. I believe in science. I believe in the science of vaccination. Now, they're just like.
So that was Sean Hannity's plea to his viewers in order to get them to get vaccinated. I can't help but to think that this is kind of a cynical move, simply because it is affecting more Republican states than it is affecting Democratic states, and that might, sway elections if more and more Republicans die. But it could also be just a simple, like, our viewers wanted to hear this, and we can't in good conscience continually push this lie that the vaccines are not effective or are in fact dangerous, and that COVID is not as serious as it was, or as it actually is. Now, as I said, Sean Hannity did this, Tucker Carlson, on the other hand, doubled down. So on Tuesday night, Tucker Carlson continued to promote vaccine skepticism, extricating former Obama administration Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius for her assertion that the unvaccinated may be putting other people's lives at risk. He said, in quote, "Weird how many vaccinated people seem to be spreading the virus at this point," Carlson said. He was responding to the news that a White House staffer and a member of the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's staff had tested positive for the coronavirus after attending a reception with Democratic lawmakers from Texas visiting in Washington, D.C. to prevent the passage of a new voting restrictions law coming out of the Texas state legislature. So maybe it's not as simple as unvaccinated bad, vaccinated virtuous. Maybe it's a disease, not a moral category, Carlson said. Maybe you should be quiet, Kathleen Sebelius. You're an idiot. Let people come to their own conclusions. No more mandates, no more masks, said Ingram on a program as well. Like Carlson, Ingram has also extensively criticized the vaccine. She called the Biden administration's door-to-door vaccine awareness campaign creepy, and it calls to vaccinate children disgusting. Be smart. Use common sense, she told viewers. Common sense here being of go ahead and die. I don't know what they actually want. This is kind of I can't wrap my mind around how ridiculous it is to actually push people not to get vaccinated. Do they want to lose? Do they want to lose more voters? Oh, thanks for the follow around, Anarcho Taco. Appreciate it. Do they want to lose more votes? Are they really that hard up for viewership that they have to, do this kind of pandering that is happening here? This dangerous pandering? I don't know. I honestly, I just can't think of it. It could be as simple as, fuck you, you can't tell me what to do, you're not my mom. It could just be this weird contrarian kind of, I do what I want, and if anybody tells me otherwise, they can go get bent kind of mentality. I could honestly see that being the kind of psychology that is going through, that is happening here, in order for people to just be like, no, I'm not doing it. Like the people that still refuse to wear seatbelts. Like I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. Speaking of things that don't make sense, common sense, as in collectivized sense, sounds kind of commie. Oh yes, good comment, Anarcho Taco. That is exactly right. And any kind of collective action is communist, according to these people. So we should call them out on their bullshit. I agree with that. Now, speaking of other bullshit, as you may be aware, the Senator Rand Paul has called Dr. Fauci a liar inside the Senate hearing committees about the the Wuhan Viral Institute and the research of gain of function research. We're going to go ahead and listen to that a bit, and then I will comment on it as we do. See how it looks. Yeah, it's perfect. All right.
Dr. Fauci, as you are aware, it is a crime to lie to Congress. Section 1001 of the U.S. Criminal Code.
I like how it's section 1001, like it's some sort of binary code of the House. Like it's got to be computerized. That's funny.
Creates a felony and a 5-year penalty for lying to Congress. On your last trip to our committee on May 11th,
go ahead and increase the speed.
You stated that the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And yet, gain-of-function research was done entirely in the Wuhan Institute by Dr. Shi and was funded by the NIH. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert into the record the Wuhan virology paper entitled Discovery of a Rich Gene Pool of Bat SARS-Related Coronaviruses. Please deliver a copy of the journal article to Dr. Fauci. In this paper, Dr. Shi credits the NIH and lists the actual number of the grant that she was given by the NIH. In this paper, she took 2 bat.
Now, so he's just, Senator Paul here is just kind of like talking about the kind of gain of function research that was being done with coronaviruses in general, especially in bats from China. The reason that this research was being done is because there was a mysterious illness that affected, I think it was six to 8 miners in China that were cleaning or doing mining inside a cave that had very similar symptoms to what we're experiencing, what has come to be known as coronavirus, COVID-19. However, that the gain of function research there actually proved to be not as fruitful as one would expect. And by that, I mean that they weren't able to necessarily increase the transmissibility of the virus in there. Now, the reason that they're doing this gain of function research, and the reason that this is controversial, is because what the hope is while doing gain of function research is to actually see how a virus can mutate and how much more effective as a virus it can get through manipulation. And if you can manipulate a virus to do a thing, then you could potentially create a vaccine for it before it happens in nature. There is some ethical concerns, and not everybody is pro gain of function research. Obviously, Senator Rand Paul is not. Dr. Fauci was to an extent. And so I'm just going to skip through this video a bit to where Dr. Fauci responds to Senator Paul, because what Senator Paul here is ultimately doing is conflating the kind of research that was going on in Wuhan with the kind of thing that COVID became. And it's not the same thing. And Dr. Fauci actually corrects him on this, and I think it's good to listen to him directly rather than listen to Rand Paul go on and on about everything, every single anti-China, anti-gain of function screen that's been going on for the last, I don't know. So let's go ahead and start
research in Wuhan.
Let's go ahead and play it at normal speed now. Oh, I can't hear him.
Your microphone.
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans,
right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I
Rickety wrecked, son.
want to say that officially.
That's about as big of a fuck you're going to get out of somebody that is old as Dr. Fauci and as much of a government person as you can expect. So, I mean, he's no Beto, right? He's not going to tell him to fuck off, but this is pretty close.
You do not know what you are talking about. Okay, you get one person.
Let's read from the NIH definition of gain of function. This is your definition that you guys wrote. It says that scientific...
Thank you, Anarcho Tarko. If you want to catch this later, you can find it on YouTube under Crowdsourced Politics as well, if you're still around to hear that. If not, I'll go ahead and drop you a link when I get the chance.
Research that increases the transmissibility among mammals is gain of function. They took animal viruses that only occur in animals, and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
And let's let Dr. Fauci.
I have to, well, now you're getting into something. If the point that you are making is that the grant that was funded as a sub-award from EcoHealth to Wuhan created SARS-CoV-2. That's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well,
we don't
wait
know
a minute.
if it did
I
come
can-
from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility.
Okay, there is actually no concrete evidence that it is coming from a lab whatsoever. This is one of those situations where a person, a lot of people have to do this, but Senator Rand Paul specifically is looking for something to blame because it doesn't fit his worldview that something like this just randomly naturally happens. Despite the fact that he's a doctor, despite the fact that we have hundreds of thousands of years of history that shows that these things happen. Ebola was naturally causing, Zika's naturally causing, the Spanish flu was naturally causing. All these things are things that happened in nature. The H1N1, the swine flu, H1N1, was naturally occurring as well. The next one that people are actually worried about is one they've been worried about for decades, which is bird flu. They're worried that if it jumps from birds to humans, that it will cause death on an order of magnitude that we have not experienced since the Spanish flu. And the reason being is that there's the COVID, which is a coronavirus, is a slew of viruses that have been in existence in the world for a very long time. The reason that this research was also being done within Wuhan and other places is because of SARS and MERS. SARS was deadly. There was several thousand people that it impacted directly in Southeast Asia. There was a lot of deaths and a lot of concern about it. The reason that SARS didn't go global and pandemic level is because it burned out naturally quickly. There was no vaccine developed for it. There wasn't any sort of mitigating treatments to reduce the symptoms, any of that. What they did find is that mask wearing helped, which is why they suggested it again. And that's why Southeast Asia, that you see a bunch of people when it's flu time, or if they're feeling ill or whatever, you see more mask wearing in Southeast Asia, especially in Korea and Japan. And they started doing the research on COVID because they were worried that this was going to be the next pandemic. MERS, also another coronavirus, was another one, and that also spurred the World Health Organization, WHO, in order to do research. At the same time, the reason why the vaccine was developed so quickly is because mRNA vaccines was in development after CRISPR gene editing was discovered as a new way to more effectively deliver inoculations, and also because genome sequencing had been started on SARS and over COVID due to the Genome Project. So these are several things that has been done. That's why we saw the vaccine develop so quickly, and why the gain of research function was being done in the first place. Well, let's go ahead and continue.
For those who funded the lab, including yourself.
I totally
This committee will allow the witness to respond.
I totally resent the lie that you are now propagating, Senator, because if you look at the viruses that were used in the experiments, that were given in the annual reports, that were published in the literature, it is molecularly impossible.
No one's saying those viruses caused it. No one is alleging that those viruses caused the pandemic. What we're alleging is that gain of function research was going on in that lab, and NIH funded it.
That wasn't the only thing that Rand Paul was saying here. He was trying to imply that the gain of research function directly contributed and caused COVID-19 to come into existence. Got some comments in from viewers, so maybe it's it isn't me, says lots of facts point to the lab and history is being whitewashed for narrative. Fauci and Gates being involved with Wuhan and the experiments there tell a lot. Follow the money and narrative. So there wasn't actually a lot of money that was given to Wuhan Viral Institute in order to do research on this from the perspective of what it actually costs to do viral research. It was pittance. It was really just a pittance. And the whole narrative that Gates had something to do with it is also bollocks, to be honest. The Gates Foundation did push to maintain the intellectual property rights of the vaccines, and the reason that they pushed for that is because Gates is a capitalist and he believes that intellectual property should be protected because that's how he made his bread and butter himself. And as far as the lab leak theory itself, no, there really isn't any evidence that points to it. What has been the narrative that has been changed, actually, it hasn't even been a narrative change. What has changed is that some people have said, okay, maybe we're a little quick to say that it wasn't a lab leak for sure. And so they've said maybe we're too quick to say, hey, it wasn't a lab leak at all. Full stop, period, and instead they're doing more investigations behind it. What about the lab techs who got sick in October of 19 and there was a ton of money given for the gain of experiments? You have spent more time spinning than actually discussing facts. There wasn't a ton of money given for it. It was less than $2 million. And that's, like I said, that's nothing. Actually, let me go ahead and look that up right now since you're wanting to argue with me. Yeah, it was $1.5 million in federal grants for bat study, and that's according to the New York Post. That is nothing. That can barely fund anything. It's not going to create enough. It's not going to be enough money to create a virus out of full cloth. And with the techs that got sick in October of 2019, they're actually saying the first cases of COVID are actually dating back to, I believe, July now. World. COVID-19 around. And I'm not finding it right now with my quick Google search because I do want to move on to a different topic, but I do believe that that is now being said that the COVID-19 was actually circulating prior to the first confirmed cases that were in October. I think they said as early as July is what they're thinking of. And so that was before the lab tech got infected, and the lab tech that got infected also might have picked it up from the wider world at large than actually getting it from the lab. So until there is hard proof evidence that this is a man-made virus, saying that it is a man-made virus is dangerous. Because if people say it's a man-made virus, they're going to look for somebody to blame and somebody to get retribution for. And that, of course, is going to be China. That's it. It's not like a fear thing. It's like if you're going, make sure you have all your ducks in a row if you're going to push something as world upending as this kind of theory. Okay. So I didn't say the bat bollocks. I said that it's bollocks that can fund enough to cause this, and it's not a lot of money. All right, but that's it for COVID-19. I do want to, sorry about that. I do want to get into some additional news. So on some happier notes, there has been an agreed to settlement with drug manufacturers of opioid drugs, Oxycontin, etc., of $26 billion from multiple states. Now, not every state that has been involved in this case to get the drug companies to settle to get to settle or to hold them to account have signed on to this agreement. So as more states signed on, the more of that $26 billion becomes available, and this money is going to be primarily used for rehabilitation, or I'm sorry, not rehabilitation, not anti-drugs. Not detox. Damn, man, my brain is just not working today. But it's going to be used to fight addiction. And so I'm going to go ahead and read a bit of this article because I think it is important to hear it from the horse's mouth. And also it makes it so where I don't accidentally talk out of my ass from having bad memory. A bipartisan coalition of states attorney generals on Wednesday announced a $26 billion settlement with Johnson & Johnson and 3 of the country's largest drug distributors regarding their roles in the U.S. opioid epidemic. If approved, the 3 major drug distributors, Cardinal Health, McKesson, and AmerisourceBergen, would pay $21 billion over 18 years, a tiny percentage of their annual revenue. The companies also would not admit any wrongdoing. And the companies not admitting to any wrongdoing is the crux of the argument of why some states do not want to sign off on this deal, because they want the company to admit that they did wrong, and that will hurt the company's reputation more than just settling out of court, because shareholders will be like, oh, well, I don't want to be involved in this if they actually did something wrong, whereas they can ignore it if the companies don't admit anything wrong. And a lot of this is about justice for some of these states as well, not just the money value. But $21 billion isn't anything to sneeze at, so it might actually lead to the more states agreeing to settle. Distributors were accused of ignoring red flags that billions of opioid pills were being illegally diverted onto the black market and subsequently into communities. Johnson & Johnson, which once manufactured and marketed opioids, will pay up to $5 billion over 9 years, with up to $3.7 billion paid during the first 3 years. The company also agreed to exit the opioid business. So Johnson & Johnson will no longer be making opioids, supposedly. And I think part of the reason why this agreement is being reached at all is because legal pot might cut into their profits anyways, and they've already made a killing, so whatever. States, cities, and counties sued the companies over their roles in fueling the opioid epidemic, which claimed about 500,000 lives over the last 20 years. Funny. This level of response from Republican lawmakers, about 500,000 lives being lost over 20 years, and yet they're still downplaying COVID. Funny how that is. The agreement would resolve the claim of both states and local governments across the country, including the nearly 4,000 that have filed lawsuits in federal and state courts. However, none of the money will go to individual families or people who suffered from opioid addiction. The substantial majority of the money is to be spent on opioid treatment and prevention, according to the Attorney General negotiated the deal. So again, this is going to opioid addiction treatment facilities and the like, in order to reduce the burdensome cost of dealing with addiction and actually put it on the people that should be paying for it in the first place, which is the manufacturers. States will have 30 days to sign on to the deal, and North Carolina Attorney General Josh Stein, Democrat, told reporters during a press conference he expects at least 40 states to agree. Stein was one of the lead negotiators, along with attorney generals from more than a dozen other states, including Pennsylvania, New York, Tennessee, Louisiana, Florida, and Texas. This was a person-made crisis, Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro said at a press conference announcing the settlement. These deaths did not have to happen. This epidemic was manufactured by an army of pharmaceutical executives and drug distributors. And that is actually especially true. So this is kind of a case that is along the lines of, similar lines of the smoking industry, the tobacco industry, I should say. And they actually did their own research to see how addictive it was, how dangerous the drugs were, found information that these drugs were highly addictive. Go figure, opioids, right? But downplayed those and actually marketed their drugs very aggressively in order to get as many people on them as possible. Now, not only that, but they were also prescribing and encouraging the prescription of drugs above and beyond the actual medical recommended amounts, especially with those kind of drugs that you might have seen on like Dateline or something like that, with the little lollipop fentanyl suckers and that sort of thing. You were only supposed to like lick it a couple of times instead of just having it sit in your mouth. But they weren't telling anybody this because the quicker the drug went through, the more you had to buy. So that is especially true. Local governments will have 150 days to agree with the terms, though Stein said there is no real deadline for local jurisdictions. Countries, tribes, and municipalities will also have to sign on to get a share of the settlement money. While no amount of money will ever be enough, the settlement will force these drug companies to pay a historic amount of money to bring much-needed treatment and recovery services to the communities that participated in the settlement, Stein said in a statement. But the ultimate amount of money that gets paid out will depend on the number of states and communities that sign onto the agreement, leaving it up to attorney generals to sell the deal. We are not quite to the finish line yet, but we are making real progress, said Tennessee Attorney General Herb Slattery. So yes, as said previously, the drugs here, the settlement here is very much based upon how many people sign on to, how many states attorney generals and localities sign on to the deal, because this money is going to be distributed to the different states and localities based on probably population and a whole host of other metrics. So the more to sign on, the more money that gets paid out. But that is some good news, because funding treatment is expensive. But I really do hope that every single state and locality actually monitors how this money is being spent, rather than it just be coming into the general fund or into a slush fund for the states and localities. And so the money actually gets paid to set up effective drug treatment facilities. What we don't want to see with this kind of money and this amount of money sloshing in through the system is that we don't want to see a situation where, you know, connected individuals are paid to set up treatment facilities. They're all high end, they're all expensive, you know, they're like horse therapies or what, like it was like drawing therapies or whatever, like these kind of ridiculous, kind of like bougie kind of treatment facilities. We want effective, cheap treatment facilities being built from this. If it goes in the other way, then it's going to be a drop in a bucket, and a lot of grifting is going to happen, and a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse is going to happen. That's what I hope it doesn't happen. So if your city or your locality, your county is going to be getting some of this money, be sure to attend your local hearings about this kind of money, and make sure that you research where the money is going so you can try to stop it from going to the wrong places. So we got some other comments coming in here. That's the thing said by people making it out to be facts, but this was okay. They need to nail the Pharma Corps' balls to the wall and make them pay and admit to this. We would be put away for life and lost all of our finances if we did this. Screw the pharma token gift. True. That's very true. I would have preferred this be some sort of proportionate to the profits that were made under with the sale of these drugs, and it should have required some admission of wrongdoing. I think the Sackler family gotten away with way too much, them personally, although they're like bankrupt now, kind of, but they're still wealthy. It's a weird situation with the Sacklers. They were the first family to fall from this, but without admitting to wrong. And if it's just if the amount of, even though it's $21 billion, if that's just a drop in the bucket, they're not going to care. They're really not. And that's sad. Despite the fact that it's a lot of money, that's really sad. All right. We also have some news coming out today about some interesting stuff coming out of investigations into Trump and his affiliates. Now, there has been recently a Trump ally, Tom Barrack, has been arrested and charged with 47 crimes for being a secret foreign agent. For those that might not be aware, Tom Barrack is a billionaire and friend of Donald Trump, who was the chairman of Trump's inaugural committee, which also mysteriously had $100 million disappear from it, which is why this investigation was launched in the first place. The investigation into inaugural funds began several months ago and has been begun to bear fruit finally. Barrack's involvement with the UAE as a senior outside advisor to Trump and the resulting impacts of Barrack's relationship with Trump kind of sheds a bunch of light on things like the embargo on Qatar, the arms sales to the United Arab Emirates, lack of response to Jamal Khashoggi's murder, etc. So this is a huge developing story here. He allegedly influenced Trump's opinions on UAE and Qatar. He was, again, his federal charges have been filed also for embezzlement and the like. So we're going to have to go over this in a little more in depth. I'm going to pull up a Washington Post article and we're going to read a bit from it here. Let me go ahead and go back over. So, writing in Fortune magazine 2 weeks before the 2016 election, Donald Trump's old friend and fundraiser, Thomas J. Barrack, outlined a new U.S. policy for the Middle East. The best hope for the America and the Arab world, he said, was U.S. support for the new, brilliant young leaders in places such as Emirates and Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia really has a lot of sway over the United Arab Emirates, so what he was really talking about here is MBS or Mohammed bin Salman Al Saud, the Prince of Saudi Arabia. Now, Barrack, who would soon become head to the president-elect inaugural committee, was already acting on behalf of one of those leaders, Abu Dhabi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed, the de facto ruler of the UAE, according to a federal indictment unsealed against him in California on Tuesday. Charges with failing to register as a foreign agent and lying to the FBI. Wonder where he heard this before. Oh, that's right. Michael Flynn. Turkey. Huh. Interesting how that's the case, right? Barrack allegedly used his close relationship with Trump to push UAE-sought actions on both the campaign and during the first 2 years of the administration. The Fortune op-ed was the product of direct input from Emirati officials, the indictment alleges. Barrack's lawyer said he will plead not guilty, because of course you're not going to plead guilty to these kind of charges. That's ridiculous. Like, no one's going to say, yeah, I did it, unless they can get a deal. And because everybody wants to still show loyalty to Trump for some god-awful knows reason, that's not going to happen. So the indictment includes references to dozens of emails and texts between him and his alleged co-conspirators, Matthew Grimes, an employee of Barrack's investment firm, Colonial Capital. Colony Capital. That sounds familiar. And Rashid Al-Malki, a UAE citizen with close connections to the Emirati family. Others in the Trump orbit may have influenced the president's decisions on Middle East policy. What was clear from the indictment is that Barrack and the other indictees claim credit for virtually every interchange between Trump and the UAE, whose government quickly became Trump's favorite. Because, of course, they're very strong and tough, and they don't take no guff. They support Israel and want to fuck Iran or whatever. It's kind of bullshit, right? Doubt if they'll ever get 45 for anything, yet his web of fools will keep going down. I fully expect Junior to get caught up. The fact that Junior hasn't been caught up yet is very surprising, honestly. You would think with that much coke in your system, you would already tell on yourself. But hey, maybe he's just been used to it too much. The proposal seemed jarring since the speech was to outline Trump's plan to build domestic energy production and oil imports from countries such as the UAE and Saudi Arabia, both leading members of the Organization for Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC. When he delivered the address, Trump confusingly followed a vow to become and stay totally independent of any need to import energy from OPEC cartel, with a promise to work with our Gulf allies to develop a positive energy relationship. So yeah, this is bananas. The Qatar stuff, tar. Yep, Qatar, here is those. During Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia, his first overseas trip to President, UAE and Saudi rulers bent the president's ear, charging that Qatar was primarily a supporter of global terrorism and was inciting rebellion against their governments. Now, there's reasons for this, okay? So Qatar was involved in supplying arms to Syrian rebels, particularly al-Nusra, while the UAE and Saudi Arabia were supplying arms to other jihadi organizations that were putting their own not spin. They were following their interest and what they viewed as the world. When this was going on, that broke positive relationships with UAE and Saudi government, with Qatar, and led to that blockade that we saw, I believe it was 2017, and the like, and also drove Trump to cut arms deals with Qatar. Now, another reason for this is that Qatar is the primary owner of Al Jazeera News Network, and Al Jazeera has been very, at least in Al Jazeera English, has been very critical of the Saudi royal family. This is very much a regional power struggle between Qatar, which has been coming into its own as it's been liberalizing both economically and culturally, comparatively to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, as well as their growing tech sector and that sort of thing. And so they were trying to push their weight around, throw a little bit elbows, to make their own way to be the one true Arab nation that should be responsible for Sunni Muslims everywhere. So that's primarily why that was happening. Now, the allegation reflects decades of disagreement among the three Prince Persian Gulf neighbors over a wealth of issues. True. The spark that led to the severing of relations just days after Trump's departure from Saudi Arabia was an incendiary quote, supposedly by the Qatar Emiri, praising Iran and Hamas. Posted on Qatar's official news website, the statement was later determined by U.S. intelligence agents to be the product of a UAE orchestrated computer hack. So again, this is regional power struggle being done in real time, and a particular person that had oil interest in the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia pushing Trump to go a certain way. I can't help but to think it's because of the kind of deals that we saw between Israel and the UAE and Saudi Arabia in regards to controlling and containing Iran's influence in the region, and Qatar not necessarily viewing it in the exact same way. Now, there isn't a lot of love between Qatar and Iran, but there isn't as much animosity and play for regional control as there is between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So Qatar could have been like kind of a middleman between those two. His then Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and then Secretary of Defense Secretary Jim Mattis were horrified that Trump could be so directly attack a crucial ally. Qatar is home of the U.S. Central Command headquarters in the region, hosting Al Udeid Air Base and thousands of U.S. troops. And Qatar's hands are considered no more dirty than those of the others where support for terrorism was concerned. As I said earlier, Qatar had supplied arms to al-Nusra, but Saudi Arabia and the UAE and their whole host of allies that basically are not necessarily vassal states, but very, very, they give a lot of deference to Saudi Arabia and the KSA Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. When it comes to policy within the Middle East, we're also supplying arms to, I don't know, ISIS, the Islamic Army of Jihad, and that sort of thing within Syria. And as what everybody should know is that every single 9/11 hijacker was a Saudi citizen, and so they've been involved in attacks against America and American interest for decades, simply because that's what they do. So it shouldn't be any surprise that this kind of thing is happening. Now, new leader, new rules, new direction, sure. But the idea that this is a liberalizing country, quickly liberalizing country, and has America's interest at heart is wrong. Grimes, according to the indictment, had conveyed UAE talking points to Barrack to use with the White House in supporting UAE criticism of Qatar. But by early September, Trump's own officials had persuaded him to change his position, and he publicly stated he might have to bring the parties to the White House and negotiate an end to their differences. According to the indictment, Barrack advised the Emiratis that the president was considering calling the squabbling leaders to Camp David, an event none of them wanted. The idea was later dropped. On or about October 13th of 2017, Al-Malek, created a telephone note with a draft message to UAE officials following a conversation with Barrack. That in the indictment reads, Barrack, he wrote, reported that several senior U.S. officials were trying to convince Trump that Qatar is a victim and that all the other countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, are also funding terrorist groups, because they were. Now, a little bit of analysis here. So the reason why Khashoggi was murdered was because of his criticism of MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in general. And he was a very big critic of them, and also really got underneath, got under crawl with these critiques. He was also very well liked and respected globally and within the KSA, within the population itself. Another reason this was the case is because MBS, just going to say MBS for now, MBS was also using the air of corruption in order to crack down on political opponents. This is something that dictators do throughout all of time. The quickest and easiest way to get the republic on your side is to show with force that you are against the corruption that has been in government for forever, decades, whatever the case may be, and that only you can fix it. And not only are you the only one that can fix it, but you're going to and are actually actively trying to fix the corruption problem. This is something that the Chinese government under Xi Jinping also did when they were cracking down on political rivals and he was cementing his own power. It's a lot cleaner to do it that way than the classic way of just murdering your opponents, because if you get the people on your side and you show them that you are anti-corruption and you're going hard on the people that are corrupt, because they were corrupt, let's be real, then there's no reason to have bloody hands. So, or at least dirty, bloody hands. So that was what was going on. And of course, Khashoggi was pointing this out. And so he was murdered for it. And given Trump's own proclivities to strongman tactics, to the lying press, and that sort of thing, he was more amicable to MBS narrative, and also his friend, who he trusts only those that he knows. Really, he trusts those people that have been close to him and loyal to him throughout his life most. He trusts those people to give him the right information, and therefore didn't come down as hard on MBS as he should have. Let's be real. He should have came down hard on them. I mean, like even with the whole arms deals that were being ran, right? Like those were nothing really. There wasn't like a lot of money, but like it just showed that he was doing something. So there is that. So that's a lot of information coming out from that. That's going to be a case that you should pay attention to. It's going to reveal a lot about the Trump administration going forward. And no, you don't have to apologize. Maybe it isn't me. I got you. It's all good. All right, I'm going to take a slight break, just drink some Mountain Dew. And some water, because I'm thirsty. All right. Other things of the news. So we are having some developments coming out of the January 6th arrests and prosecutions of the people that have rioted in the country, that rioted and participated in what should be called an insurrection for those people. One of those people is a DEA agent. A DEA agent was charged in connection with, let me unmute. Special agent was charged in the 6 riots and insurrection. That's just one of the developments that are coming on, so that's interesting. Another one is, I think there was an NS. Oh, yeah. So the rioter that captured Babbitt's death on video is pled guilty to the insurrection in the case. Andrew Bennett of Maryland pled guilty Thursday in D.C. District Court to illegally demonstrating inside the U.S. Capitol. He got the same deal as other nonviolent rioters, pleaded to a single misdemeanor. So one of the things that's going to be interesting about this case is that a lot of people that are being rounded up and charged weren't necessarily themselves doing anything other than criminal trespassing. And it was only criminal trespassing because the Capitol was on lockdown and there was an ongoing hearing at the Capitol. So these are going to be misdemeanor charges, not federal indictments. Or they're federal indictments, but they're misdemeanor charges is what I should say. So they're not felonies. That's what I meant. They're not felonies, and therefore these people won't lose their guns. Despite the meme that's going around on social media, that's not gonna be what's going on for a lot of these people. What else? Okay, but there has been a felony charge, and that is Capitol Rioter gets 8 months in prison in first felony sentencing from January 6th attack. So this person from Florida who waved a Trump 2020 flag on the floor of the Senate chambers on January 6th was sentenced to 8 months in prison on Monday, the first time a Capitol riot. Defendant was sentenced for a felony charge. Paul Higgins, a 38-year-old crane operator, pleaded guilty last month to one count of obstruction of an official proceeding and acknowledged that he took a selfie and joined a group of rioters who assembled in front of the Senate chamber with the intention to obstruct the certification of the 2020 election. On announcing the sentence, which was less than the 15 to 21 month sentence recommended when Hodgkins pled guilty, Judge Rudolph Moss called the Capitol attack an assault on democracy, but said Hodgkins' lack of criminal history and willingness to accept responsibility warranted a lower sentence. Hodgkins' 8-month prison sentence will be followed by 2 years of supervised release. During the time, this particular individual will be not allowed to own a weapon because it is a charge. And so there is that. So that is interesting. So that's the updates, some of the updates from the January 6th arrest. Now, what we have here to talk about, this is the last thing I'm going to talk about when it comes to January 6th, is what we have is the Special House Committee on Insurrection, January 6th. And one of the things that we're going to watch in its entirety, and it's fairly short, is Liz Cheney's talk about what is transpiring in regards to Republicans and their look at the January 6th Commission. And then we'll talk about why that's the case and if there's anything more. So we're going to go ahead and play this.
I want to take a minute just to talk about the appointments to the January 6th Select Committee. The rhetoric that we have heard from the minority leader is disingenuous. The attack on this building on January 6th was the worst attack on this Capitol since 1814. It was an attack on our Constitution. We supported what would have been the very best option, which was a bipartisan independent commission. The minority leader opposed that. He lobbied against it in the Senate, and the Senate blocked it. The American people deserve to know what happened. The people who did this must be held accountable. There must be an investigation that is nonpartisan, that is sober, that is serious, that gets to the facts wherever they may lead. And at every opportunity, the minority leader has attempted to prevent the American people from understanding what happened, to block this investigation. Today, the Speaker objected to 2 Republican members. She accepted 3 others. She objected to 2, one of whom may well be a material witness to events that led to that day, that led to January 6th. The other, who disqualified himself by his comments in particular over the last 24 hours, demonstrating that he is not taking this seriously. He is not dealing with the facts of this investigation, but rather viewed it as a political platform. This investigation must go forward. The idea that anybody would be playing politics with an attack on the United States Capitol is despicable and is disgraceful. And I am absolutely dedicated and committed to making sure that this investigation holds those accountable who did this and ensures that it never happens again. And
So was Liz Cheney talking about the January 6th commission that is currently still trying to be started within the House. The people that Pelosi had nixed were a congressman from Indiana and Jim Jordan's. I don't remember the congressman from Indiana's name off the top of my head, but we will get into that. And the reason for Jim Jordan being blocked should be obvious to even the most partisan among the GOP, is that he is not, one, a serious person that takes these things seriously, but two, he might have been involved in some way as he was taking calls from the president and the president's staff during the quote unquote insurrection. Now, what has happened because of this is that House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, the Republican from California, has said that he will pull every single member of the select committee that he put forward in retaliation for these two people being denied. Now, if any of you had paid attention, you should, if not paid attention, but if any of you were, I'll say paying attention. If any of you were paying attention during the previous committees, the impeachment trial or the any of these things that have taken place involving Trump, Jim Jordan's has been a partisan hack of the highest caliber, and I mean that seriously. This guy will suck Cheeto until it is gone of all spray tan. And part of that reason being is that he is very much Trumpian himself with this. He does not view the Democrats as being good faith actors. He doesn't view them as being much of Americans, even in that case. He's highly, highly partisan, more so than probably any other Republican that I can think of, absent maybe Ted Cruz. But Ted Cruz is also very selfish, and is only looking out for number one, which is Ted Cruz. So there is that as well. And Liz Cheney is on that commission. Liz Cheney was actually appointed by Pelosi. And Pelosi has said now that this has happened is that she might be entertaining appointing more anti-Trump Republicans to the commission in order to keep it, one, bipartisan, two, getting at Trump as much as possible. There was an attempt to keep Republicans in the fold, but when you nominate people like Jim Jordan's and Jim Banks, you're going to look just like you don't care. Jim Banks, that was the Republican from Indiana, he is looking to do it as, like Liz Cheney said, a political platform, grandstanding, not taking it seriously in the solemn event that it should be. It maybe even more so than what happened during the six Benghazi investigations. And, Jim Jordan, we've seen him. He does nothing but grandstand, obfuscate, and pivot and all these other kind of things in order to present his case to his constituents and make a name for himself within the Republican circles or the GOP circles that he resides in. McCarthy, for his point, actually spoke.
Who's got the best facts?
Hold on, mute this for a second. So McCarthy has also stated that he will pull all his people as previously stated, and I think it's important that we actually watch his comments about that, or at least listen to them. So they're not very long. It's about 1 minute and 47 seconds or so. So let's go ahead and do well. So this is from his statement. So I got it muted still. Ads, man. I got to get an ad blocker or something.
Pelosi has created a sham process. Unless Speaker Pelosi reverses course and seats all 5 Republicans, we will not participate.
All 5. I'm not going to participate. Had no intention to do it. Had no intention to participate really in the first place, but now I have an excuse to.
Those 2 questions. Why were we ill prepared? Why did they know on December 14th? Why would they jeopardize the lives of the Capitol Police? We will run our own investigation. We have law enforcement, we have military, we have doctors, we have people from all walks of life.
So one of the things that actually isn't going to be possible with a dual investigation that isn't part of the House Select Committee is that they won't have subpoena powers. So what they're essentially saying is that since you are making this partisan, Pelosi, we're going to make it extra partisan, and we're going to hire a bunch of yes men and private investigators that want to promote the narrative that we're promoting to basically muddy the waters, which is what this entire process is designed to do, and why I don't think that they were serious in the first place. In fact, it probably was indicated to them if they put on Jim Banks and Jim Jordan, well, at least Jim Jordan, that would have been denied. And if that was the case, then they weren't going to go through, but they probably weren't going to go through anyways, so they would have made up another excuse. Now, with that said, I personally would have set Jim Jordan, Jim Banks down and just called them liars the entire time. There's already this huge partisanship bent within Congress and in American politics, calling them liars that they are and showing them the disrespect that they deserve actually probably would have been, one, more entertaining for me, and two, would have been more useful to the process and less muddying of the waters than what we're seeing now with a dual investigation where Republicans are going to release a thing and Democrats are going to release a thing, and the American people are like, oh, I don't know who to believe.
They want to know the answer. The American people deserve that. They don't deserve politics. They don't deserve destroying the institution. No.
So if the American people don't deserve politics or partisanship, why would you submit Jim Jordan's name? Because you're a liar. Now, the destroying of the House, that's hyperbolic. That's not actually what's happening here. But it is a little unprecedented for a Speaker of the House to deny the other party's nominees to a select committee. I don't think it hasn't happened before. And so he has a point there, which is why I said I would have just let him see.
No committee in Congress will work if one person is picking all who can serve.
Now, see, that isn't what happened, though. Pelosi didn't pick all that could serve. He had 3 people that he had submitted 5. 2 of them were denied. Jim Jordan definitely shouldn't have been denied. He shouldn't be anywhere near a select committee at all. In fact, I don't even think he should be seated in Congress because of how much of a piece of shit he is. But his people did. His district voted him in office. His district should have to vote him out of office, or his district should just get redrawn so it doesn't happen again. But he's got a small point there. So kudos to that.
This has not happened before. House Democrats must answer this question. Why are you allowing a lame duck speaker to destroy this institution?
So that is a very subtle jab. So the reason I say it's a very subtle jab is because Speaker Pelosi had said that she would step down. I don't think it's going to happen, but they're calling her a lame duck speaker because they are confident, or at least he is projecting confidence, that they will take the majority in the House in 2022. If history is prologue, chances are the Republican Party will actually take over the House in 2022, not only because the party that isn't in the presidency gains and the party that is in the presidency loses typically in these things, but also because Republicans won enough state legislatures due to gerrymandering and a lot of other fuck litgames that they can actually redraw the maps in their favor, more so than what happened in 2010. Between 2010 and 2020, a little thing called massive amounts of data happened that allows them to actually precisionally cut into different districts to make it to where they can maximize the amount of Republican seats that they have while not seeming to do it in such a way that is completely and utterly partisan. It can be done with such precision that they can reasonably carve up districts to get 55% of Republican votes. And then if they lose 2 or 3%, then it was just a close race and they were the better candidate. But they're not the better candidate. They're just better at picking their voters than Democrats. Democrats need to probably do the same thing, but because Democrats actually care about democracy to an extent, or just like shooting them fucking selves in the foot and saying dumb shit, a lot of the states that would have gained seats or could have tilted the the balance towards Democrats, i.e. California, New York, I think Colorado, among others, decided to go with independent commissions in order to draw district maps rather than partisans, and drawing them for maximum consternation, I guess would be the word, or maximum, not drawing them in a partisan way to make the seats actually more competitive. I think it should be a federal law that districts need to be competitive, or at least not overly partisan. That can't always happen, but if it's the law, or if there's some sort of ruling or something like that, you could tilt it, because the reason that we're seeing as much partisanship as we are is because districts are going to overwhelmingly vote either Democrat or Republican, so there's no reason to come towards the middle and compromise on anything, because if you do that, you actually piss off your own voters.
This is the people's house, not Pelosi's house.
So this is the people's house is another refrain used because, one, it's true, but two, that's what has been a battling rallying cry for the people that were actually at the January 6th insurrection/riot. And it is going to give them credence to, yes, this is my house. This is why I'm here. Maybe what we were doing wasn't illegal. Pause for dramatic effect.
We asked to do our job.
What he means by do their job is be as partisan as possible.
We want to do our job.
By being as partisan as possible.
I may object to the people that she put on the committee, but I respect her right to do it.
No, he doesn't.
Just as every leader has done before. Destroy an institution for your own political gain.
I don't believe he believes any of this. This is all fucking posturing rhetoric bullshit. If they're talking about destructions of institutions, they would not allow the filibuster to have been used as much in the Senate. They would have been bitching about that. They didn't. It's a power play. That's all this is. Just admit to it.
America expects more and deserves more.
I hate that. Stop auto playing loud commercials, damn it. So that is what's going on with the January 6th Select Commission. And yeah, so what do you guys think? Hit me up on Twitter. Go ahead and follow us on Twitter or Facebook. If you do Twitter, just put in the Twitter. There we go. Got the Twitter up there for you. And if you do Facebook, go ahead and join the Facebook group as well to get onto the Facebook community and tell me your thoughts about what is going on with the January 6th Commission. Now, we've been streaming for about an hour, 20 minutes, so it's time for some news of the weird. If this is your first time joining the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup, we at Crowdsourced Politics like to do a fun little thing where we cover a article or some sort of bit of news that was pretty strange and didn't get a lot of play, but to give our thoughts about what this may mean for the broader politic. Oh no. Oh, somehow deleted them all. Oh man. Oh, that's so bad. Wow. All right. I accidentally deleted weird news. Well, I'm just going to Google weird news real quick because that makes me an asshole. Wow. All right. All right. First, so we're going in completely blind, everybody. So, let's see. Dang it, there was some good ones too. Oh man, I feel so bad. I have a working document where I collect all the news articles and things like that we're going to share with people on our Patreon once we get it fully set up and we're good to go. And I just somehow managed to delete all the weird news that we collected, and that really sucks. Damn. Oh, here we go. This is an interesting one. So, we're going to go ahead and do that. This was actually one of them, I think. So, man with coronavirus disguises his wife on Indonesian flight. going to read this article. An Indonesian man with coronavirus had boarded a domestic flight disguised as his wife, wearing a niqab, covering his face and carrying fake IDs and a negative PCR test result. But the cover didn't last long. Police say a flight attendant aboard CityLink plane traveling from Jakarta to Torrent in North Maluku province on Sunday noticed the man change the clothes in the lavatory. He bought the plane ticket with his wife's name and brought the identity card, PCR test results, and the vaccination card with his wife's name. All documents under his wife's name. Torrent Police Chief Arikai Laksamata said after arresting the man upon landing. He was only identified by his initials. Police took him for a COVID-19 test, which came back positive. The man is currently self-isolating at home, and police said the investigation will continue. Indonesia is in the grips of the worst coronavirus surge in Asia, with 33,722 new cases confirmed and deaths of 1,383 in the last 24 hours. The total number of reported cases is 2.9 million, with 77,583 fatalities. Restrictions on non-essential travel, including a mandatory negative coronavirus test, and public gatherings have been toughened over the Eid al-Adha holiday this weekend. So that's kind of funny, right? This is a thing that Google dumb Florida criminal last weekend date. I'm sure there's some shit there. Yeah, probably. I don't want to just make news of the weird Florida news though, and so I'm trying. I want to hit up international places and like each state eventually. So I'm going to end up making a map and starting over and getting a different news story of the weird from that. But I find this pretty interesting because it's very American if you think about it. We had people in America getting fake vaccination cards when there was the idea of a vaccine passport. We had people in the U.S. like saying they didn't have COVID when they did in order to board various cruise lines and that sort of thing. There was that guy that had COVID and was supposed to be isolating on the cruise ship when it first started off, but he'd snuck out to go get food, I think is what it was, to get food. And that sort of thing. So I think that's pretty interesting, and a little bit of funny breakup of the news, even though it was dangerous with this. What are your thoughts? Go ahead and drop me a line on that one. Oh, in other news, we have, let's see, what is good to talk about right now? I think it is a good time to talk about Ben & Jerry's and what is going on with them. So in this segment, I'm going to call it Ben & Jerry's tops ice cream with activism, refuses to sell in occupied territories. So for people that may not be aware, Ben & Jerry's came out on July 19th and stated, and this is their words, quoted, quote, their words, said, "We believe it is inconsistent with our values for Ben & Jerry's ice cream to be sold in the occupied Palestinian territories, OPT. We also hear and recognize the concerns shared with us by our fans and trusted partners. We have a long-standing partnership with our licensee, who manufactures Ben & Jerry's ice cream in Israel and distributes it in the region. We have been working to change this, and so we have informed our licensee that we will not renew the license agreement when it expires at the end of next year. Although Ben & Jerry's will no longer be sold in the occupied Palestinian territories, we will stay in Israel, though through a different arrangement. We will share an update on this as soon as we're ready." So, as you may be aware, Ben & Jerry's is a very social conscious company. They make ice cream. They're from Vermont. They're very progressive, and this is something that they've come to the conclusion that they should do. This isn't the only social kind of thing that Ben & Jerry's has done. They've pulled out ice cream in different markets, made an equality Ben & Jerry's flavor for LGBT, and when Obergefell was passed or ruled on, and that sort of thing. So it's very in line with the company's values. Ben & Jerry's is also, I believe it still is, I'm going to double check, but I believe it is a benefit corporation, which means that they don't have to put their shareholders at the top of their commitments. They can also put in what they call stakeholders, and in the case with Ben & Jerry's, that includes a committee that values their progressive beginnings and the fans as well. So if they get enough complaints about a thing, they will actually listen to their customers and make social conscious decisions based on that. Now, why am I talking about this? Well, It's because who thought a little bit of ice cream could piss off so many people? From this, we have seen a slew of Republicans and even Mayor de Blasio saying that they will no longer eat Ben & Jerry's. As soon as this dropped, this information dropped, I saw pictures that were reminiscent of Republicans and conservatives burning Nike jerseys and dumping Nike shoes and destroying Yeti coolers and all these other things in a tirade of, you can't tell me what to do, fuck you, I'm not going to listen to your social propagandist Marxist bullshit that they were going through. And people were throwing away their own ice cream that they had bought because Ben & Jerry's is apparently anti-Semitic. Now, there is nothing anti-Semitic about deciding not to sell your product in occupied territories while still agreeing to sell it within Israel proper. In fact, if the company decided it will no longer sell ice cream to Israel, that's still not anti-Semitic. That is maybe anti-Israeli, but it is not anti-Semitic because Israel doesn't represent all Jewish people. So, that is, now I've said that, it's out of the way. Now, another reason why this is important is because of the Anti-Bds laws. BDS stands for, oh crap, now I can't remember things. I need to really get better. What is it? BDS. Boycott, divestment, and sanctions. The boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement is a call to treat Israel as the world treated South Africa during apartheid due to its treatment of the Palestinians in both the occupied territories and within Israel proper. The idea is that if enough pressure comes to bear on Israel, they will change their ways and stop treating the Palestinians like shit. That may or may not happen. There's a lot of religious components to this, a lot of people on both sides that don't really want to, I don't know, compromise. So it may or may not happen. I actually had a good discussion with this with Jonah from Quibbles Over Coffee on Monday. Go ahead and check that video out on the YouTube channel. So with this, we're seeing that Ben & Jerry's might be actually the first real test of American anti-BDS laws. So with anti-BDS means that there have been a slew of laws passed within the United States. I think there's 30 states, and there's also a law that is federal that make it a crime to actually participate in boycott, divest, and sanction movement, which means that if a company decides to no longer sell to a Israel company, then it will be seen as contrary to American foreign policy and result in fines and sanctions against said company. It's kind of interesting that Republicans are all about anti-cancel culture, yet are staunchly pro-anti-BDS laws, which is the ultimate of cancel cultures when the entire US government's telling you, shame on you, don't do that, we're going to take away your money. So with Ben & Jerry's being the large company it is, multi-million-dollar company, deep pockets, deep backers, it will be actually one of the companies that will be able to take this case to the Supreme Court should they actually suffer under anti-BDS laws. And with the amount of Republicans in various states and localities saying that they will not, they are calling for Ben & Jerry's to be banned, they're calling for them to be sued under these laws, it is very possible that this will make its way to the Supreme Court. Even under this Supreme Court, because of how staunchly free speech it is, and the fact that Roberts is very much pro-corporate speech, I doubt that the BDS laws will be upheld in the Supreme Court. Now, the existence of the law itself has a disquieting impact on people's activities and will make people worried that they themselves might be targeted for sanctions and the like. So, it's going to be very interesting to see this. I don't think that these laws will be upheld by the Supreme Court, but the damage is already being done with the everyday people being targeted by these laws. There was cases at colleges that have these kind of rules and regulations and that sort of thing. These are making their way through the courts through free speech advocacy groups and the like. But the but it hasn't. But in order to seek redress from the courts, you have to be a party that's actually been injured. And so if Ben and Jerry's is injured by this through sanctions or divestment or whatever by governments, then we could see this play out in court. To that point, I do want to read the article that I have up about this for you all to give it some additional background here. So this is from Forward. Ben & Jerry's announced Monday, blah, 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 said that. So more than 30 states, this is the crux of it. More than 30 states have passed legislation meant to deter boycott of Israel by penalizing companies that refuse to do business with the Jewish state. And, okay, with the Israeli government, I'm not going to call it Jewish state. That's bad. Bad Forward. Bad. Call it Israeli, call it Israel state. Not a Jewish state. It's an Israeli state. And some proponents of these laws now say that they should be also applied to companies like ice cream maker Ben & Jerry's that refuse to do business with Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Selective boycotts are just as illegal as total boycotts, said Mark Stern, chief legal officer of the American Jewish Committee, which has lobbied for laws meant to stem the boycott, divest, and sanctions movement aimed at Israel. The company's decision is roiling Jewish Twitter. This is true. It is roiling Jewish Twitter. There has been things, but again, stop conflating Jews with Israel. Bad Forward argument. Bad. So Israeli Twitter. Pro-Israeli supporters have inundated a company with demands to roll it back, and several kosher markets in New York and elsewhere have decided to drop the product. This is true. There has been a couple of large kosher grocer chains that have decided that by being anti-Israeli, you're being anti-Jewish, and therefore you are no longer kosher, and they won't serve your product, which is their right to do as a company. I don't care if the company does it. The company is fine. This is talking about laws. Laws are a force of government. Companies can more or less do what they want in these kind of regards, especially when it comes to politics. And there you have it for that. So there's that. But Jeremy Ben-Ami, president of the liberal pro-Israel group J Street, said critics are wrong to deem Ben & Jerry's move as a boycott of Israel because the settlements are not an internationally recognized part of Israel, and that calling for economic equality without political equality is an untenable position for the Jewish establishment and pro-Israel organizations to hold. Either this is all part of Israel, in which case everybody who lives in the occupied territory should have equal rights, or there's a distinction. You can't have your ice cream and eat it too. Aw, that's precious. Stern said several states, including New York, New Jersey, and Illinois, go farther than the rest, with laws that ban state agencies from contracting with companies that refuse to do business with Israel or with territories controlled by Israel, or prohibit public pension funds from investing in them. And that is the crux here. This can actually show a material harm caused by an anti-free speech law that was passed by the states. Ben & Jerry's, I'm sure, is part of some pension plans, because Ben & Jerry's is a very well-established company, multinational, and is owned by another larger company, Unival, which is probably a part of companies' pension plans through mutual funds and the like. If those laws are applied in the case of Ben & Jerry's, it could have repercussions far beyond whether or not workers are able to dig into a bowl of Cherry Garcia state cafeterias in Albany. The Vermont company is owned by Unilever, a multinational company based in London with $50 billion in revenues from sales of products like Hellmann's mayonnaise, Lipton tea, and Dove personal care products. Gilad Erdan, the Israeli ambassador to the United States, wrote a letter to governors in the 35 states that have passed some form of anti-boycott legislation, saying that rapid and determined action must be taken to counter such discriminatory and anti-Semitic actions. If it is anti-Semitic to be pro-Palestinian, then I guess most of the people I know are anti-Semitic. This is a conflating of terms in order to protect conservative Israeli governments from legitimate criticism. If you keep conflating the state of Israel with Jews in general, you are saying that liberal Jews that aren't pro-Israeli policy are they themselves anti-Semitic and self-hating. This is a very bad take to do, because what it does is it actually might increase anti-Semitism, because you are conflating all of Jews with Israel policy. And Israel policy, as I argued on the program with Jonah of Quibbles Over Coffee, is performing immoral actions. And if you're against those immoral actions, like I am, pro-human rights, like I am in this regard, then you are going to be labeled as anti-Semitic. And that's just not good. That muddies the waters way too much. But critics chafed at the notion that boycott of Israel settlements in West Bank, which are widely considered illegal under international law, was equivalent to participating in the BDS movement, which effectively calls for an end to Israel's status as a Jewish state. This is true. So with BDS, the goal is to remove the idea of Jewish nationhood from the state of Israel. And that means that it can be culturally a Jewish state. It can be seen as a refuge for Jewish people, but the laws themselves cannot privilege Jewish people over the other residents or citizens of Israel, which is what currently happens under current Jewish law. For example, a Palestinian cannot marry a Israeli citizen, even if they're both Arabs. There's laws against marriage being recognized unless it's under the Jewish rules of marriage, which is illiberal. Is what most of us see it as, and the like. All right. Ben & Jerry's announcement that it would not renew its license with an Israeli company to manufacture and distribute its products in the West Bank also stated that it would maintain its presence in Israel through a different arrangement, a line that was apparently inserted by Unilever without consulting Ben & Jerry's independent board of directors. Now, I'm not sure if that is correct. I've seen this. I've seen this stated, and the website itself stated that it would still be in there. What I think is saying is that the announcement was stated they would no longer serve in those territories, and so that might have gotten inserted, but I don't think it's true. I've looked at this article before. I looked elsewhere, and I just didn't see any clear proof that this was actually the case with that. So yeah, I think that wraps it up. Could this actually help the bigots who don't want to sell cakes or anything along the lines? Waiting for Con to screen something about wedding cakes. Ben is a dick. I still like Jerry, so I'm only eating Ben and Jerry's half the time when I want ice cream. That's funny. I don't think this could actually help people that don't want to sell cakes or anything along those lines. I think that if that was in response to something that I said, if a person doesn't want to sell somebody an item because of an immutable characteristic, and in the United States, plus religious beliefs, that is a violation of their civil rights. And of course, there's the whole intersection between where does my religion's rights to practice my religion and my ability to run a business intersect, which is what the whole cake fiasco was with Master Cake, I think it was all called. And I think that as I've stated previously, I think the court ruled incorrectly. I think they should have just been like, I think they should have told the baker, hey, you have to go to referral only, or make your wedding cake sales fully private and not offer it as a public service. And I think that would have been the proper compromise. But yeah. So I think I covered the Ben & Jerry's thing fairly well. I discussed a lot of what could possibly come from this. As I said, there's been a slew of Republican lawmakers from states and localities calling for the boycott of Ben & Jerry's, as well as finding them under their own anti-BDS laws. Texas and Florida is getting involved in it as well with this. And like, although Texas is a little busy trying to reduce voting access to its residents, which I am one, because of issues surrounding that. Okay, so yeah, I think that covers the Ben & Jerry's thing. I think that's an interesting case, and it's something that I will be paying attention to closely as things develop there. Another thing that we have for international kind of news is what's going on in Cuba. We covered Cuba pretty extensively in our last news roundup, but we have some developments that happened as of around 5 p.m. Eastern today, where Biden is actually coming out with plans following the protests that happened. So the Biden administration has imposed new sanctions against Cuba's defense minister and the special force units of the Interior Ministry that was directly involved in human rights abuses during a government crackdown on widespread protests on the island this month. So these are targeted sanctions, not to be confused with the kind of like embargo that's happening on Cuba by the United States at large. But these are things that are targeting individuals that were directly participating within, well, maybe not necessarily directly, but had, the orders been given and the like against individual Cuban dissenters and had violated their human rights. So with individualized sanctions like these can be effective at changing individualized behavior. They might not actually push a regime to be changed, but they're not targeting the people themselves. So if a dictator, autocrat, government, foreign ministers, what have you, are targeted under these kind of sanctions, and then they themselves decide, well, I'm going to jack up prices or grift more money and steal more money from that because I'm not getting as much as I could be if I was given carte blanche to the international community, that's on them. They're putting their own personal greed above the well-being of their people. And, I don't blame the sanctions for that, because you have to respond in some way when human rights are being. So what else has been happening is that there's been a slowing exploring of new policies towards Cuba to reverse many of the actions taken by Trump to restrict travel, trade, and other forms of outreach. As you all should be aware of, the Obama administration in the waning days of the Obama administration, relationships with Cuba were starting to be normalized. They could have happened sooner, and it would have been harder for Trump to come in and be like, hey, we're nixing all this and actually putting in more sanctions. But things like opening the embassy happened, allowing trade, allowing family members to visit the island more, and tourists on special visas, allowing for more remittances and access to banks and that sort of thing were beginning to happen under Obama. Trump nixed all that as part of probably him showing support for the Cuban community within Florida, because they voted for him overwhelmingly and the like. And so those things are going to be looked at again by his administration. But these new protests are kind of creating a wrinkle in that. Cuba has been also working to kind of liberalize its economy to some extent in order to attract more foreign tourists, in order to bring in more foreign dollars, euros, dollars, yen, what have you, and allowing it to develop more internally and to give the regime, it's a one-party state, the regime more access to foreign markets and luxury goods and the like, and also to develop the island. So if these protests are not recognized as being legitimate, then the likelihood of that money coming in is going to be reduced. In that case, the Cuban government actually issued a rare apology for what it, and claiming and taking responsibility for some of the issues that have been going on over the past month with the rise in prices of goods, of staple goods, food, and the like, due to some of the actions that are taken in order to attract that money into the country. Essentially, what was going on, and I said this last week, but I'll give a quick recap. Essentially, what was going on, Cuba had two currencies. One was a Forex currency, a currency used explicitly for foreign trade, and another one was used for internal. The foreign trade subsidized the internal and helped keep prices on food and staples lower than they would otherwise be with a floating exchange system. In order to attract international currencies into the state, they started to break the linkage between the two and allow the Forex currency to be the currency and do a floating exchange. And that put pressure on the country due to COVID. That's what we're seeing there. Now, in addition to all the stuff that's going on with the Biden administration, with the Cuban government, this is having a direct impact on Republican 2024 presidential primary contenders' views on how to deal with the Cuban government. We've seen Ron DeSantis call for like things like weather balloons to send in internet, and slapping Cubans' hands more, doing more sanctions, more pressure in order to get the regime to be overturned by the Cuban people. Biden and Obama are not really down with that. They don't have that kind of worldview, and so you're going to see this be used as an issue to attack Democrats on in 2022 and in 2024, where there are large either ex-Cuban populations or large populations of people from Latin America that are socialist or communist. What's a good word? Hesitant? No. Anti-socialist or anti-communist. I'll just say anti-socialist or anti-communist due to their direct relations with people like Hugo Chavez and the Cuban regime. So that's what we're seeing with that. In this, we can have I have a Politico article that talks about how Senator Cruz is speculating that Biden administration told Cubans not to come to the United States because they tend to vote Republican, and these kind of ridiculous kind of conspiratorial or nonsense things, because it might be projection. I don't know. It's hard to tell with some of these people, but yeah. Okay. What else we got today? I didn't cover the economy. Oh man. So there it is. So as you all may be aware right now, and this is what I'm going to wrap up with, is that we are experiencing a combination of a supply crunch and a demand increase, which converge to create inflation. We have higher inflation now than we've had for the last year. Now, some of that can be attributed to pent-up demand, and pent-up demand being everybody was staying at home for, a year. People with money weren't really going out, or were refusing to go out because they were afraid of COVID, or didn't want to get sick, or was just playing it safe, or couldn't go out because of lockdowns, mask mandates, or just what have you. People coming out and going out in droves now are driving the prices up for everything. Now, when that happens, you're going to have some inflation. The question is whether that inflation will be sustained. Companies right now are looking at long-term price increases to deal with the cost increases that go into their operating budget. The two biggest being parts and labor. Now, labor costs are going up in the United States thanks to things like an increased minimum wage. Delaware recently signed $15 minimum wage, and a slew of other countries over the last year and a half, states over the last year and a half, have also signed on to $15 minimum wage. With pressure being on labor itself because of high demand and low labor participation, you're seeing more pressure naturally happen to push wages up as labor is scarce as well. Now, with that, we can get into some of the examples. So Oreo companies looking to increase prices, Whirlpool's looking to increase prices as well. And there's one thing that not a lot of people may be aware of, but it has an actual economic term called shrinkflation. Now, it is exactly what it sounds like. What shrinkflation is that you are paying more for less, but you're paying the same amount rather or less. And people are very, very price conscious, but they're not conscious about the amount of goods that they are buying. So if you go into the store today, chances are you'll see reduced size of cereal boxes, maybe a little bit less weight on toilet paper and the like, but the price didn't go down with the decrease in amount. That's shrinkflation. If you want to get a good look at shrinkflation and analysis on that, go ahead and check out NPR's Planet Money. They do a good story about it. But like I said, long story short, less goods, same price, shrinkflation. It's how companies can hide the price increases and pass those on to consumers without having consumers be the wiser. Another issue that we're seeing here is that we're actually seeing a run up in housing demand. Housing demand in general, so that includes renting and owning, might push inflation up higher because more people are competing for fewer homes. Part of the reason for this is because of the real estate market being fundamentally changed, or not necessarily fundamentally changed, but altered. And no, that's the same thing. Being the demand for housing being pushed forward due to the pandemic. Now, the reason I say that is that people like myself, young professionals that might have been working at an office for years or whatever, and had this and were enjoying their apartment in the middle of the city, might have decided during the pandemic to buy a house for more space in order to set up their offices. With the immense amount of savings from young professionals, middle class and up people, you have a lot more money that can be used to buy housing. If a person was looking to buy a house within the next 5-10 years, but suddenly has enough money for a down payment because they haven't been going out and spending it all the time, they are more likely to do that now while they still have the money than push it and to later. And with rates being low as they are for mortgage, we're talking 2.5%, anywhere between 1.8% interest to 2.8% interest, depending on your credit level. Those are historically low. I myself had actually refinanced. I bought my house, bought my mortgage, I should say, right before the start of the pandemic because I was doing well enough that I could do this, plus the GI Bill. Yay, GI Bill. Thank you for that. But I actually refinanced my house so I could save $100 a month on the front end, just to have a little bit more spending money and the ability to maybe put it into savings so it could grow over time more than paying off my house quicker could do. So people doing that sort of thing and doing it now rather than later is putting demand on the houses. One of the things that we see with that is that we're actually seeing the market cool down because prices have been going through the roof too quickly. Part of this is because of foreign investors and mutual fund investors like BlackRock buying up a lot of excess housing supply and putting pressure onto prices, but that's slowing. And then another case being that people that might have been able to afford a house a year ago can't afford a house now because of the prices being out of their budget, and therefore waiting it out, which is actually being recommended by a lot of economists and realtors at large. So we have that. We also are seeing in the economy a jump in claims of 419,000 for unemployment. Part of the reason for this increase in unemployment, despite the fact that the economy is on the cusp of a boom, it's still being, it's still filtering out, it's still shifting, there's still settling that needs to happen, is because of the chip shortage that we've been talking about over our last few programs. The auto manufacturing industry has actually went through and shuttered plants temporarily due to the inability to produce more cars because they can't get a hold of chips in order for the onboard computers that exist in modern cars. So they're unable to actually manufacture the cars, and if they can't manufacture them, paying people to do no work is actually not in their best interest. So they've shuttered plants down, at least temporarily. That is a temporary thing. A lot of the increase in inflation that we've seen is from actually auto manufacturing, or not from automobiles rather. And once that settles and becomes quote unquote normal, whatever normal actually is, you should see a decrease in the amount of money needed to buy a car, and therefore a decrease in inflation. Now, one of the things that I did want to talk about is, and this is like an analysis bit, is that what we're seeing now with labor is we might actually see a decrease in labor force participation due to stimulus money. This is not a thing that liberals and leftists want to talk about necessarily because it might give power to Republicans for people being told that they are just going to get paid to sit on their ass. But it's one of those things that actually is, in my opinion, a good thing. The child tax credit went into effect this month. It goes through December, and it is basically half of the earned income tax credit you would get from being a parent onto the front end in a prebate, which means you get paid a X amount of dollars every month until through December, and then you'll get the remaining half in your 2021 tax filings. It is a significant amount of money for poor people. For upper middle class people and above, not so much. And this is actually enough money that might justify a person going from a 2-income household to a 1-income household. Let me explain. And I'm going to pull up this on the camera here. So this is the child tax credit calculator provided here by CNET that is going to determine how much you should get a month based on the number of children you have and your adjusted gross income. A typical family in the United States, we can say, makes, I believe, $62,000 a year. Actually, let's go ahead and check that. Median income USA. Oh, okay. So median income is actually 31. I guess I thought it was 60. Oh, okay. Yeah, median household income is 68. That's what it was. That must be median income for individuals. For household income, it's 68,703. So we'll go ahead and just round that up to 69,000 for this exercise. So we're going to say 69,000 for a family of 4. And so we're going to say married. And we're going to say we're going to not say children 5 and under. We're just going to say all the kids in this hypothetical scenario are between the ages of 6 and 17, because that is where the lower end of the money is coming from. And we'll say they have 2 kids. So we're saying 2 adults, 2 kids, $69,000 a year. Calculated that. Look at that. Your estimated child tax credit is $6,300. You will receive $3,000 in monthly payments from July through December of 2021. Afterwards, you will receive another $3,000 after you file your 2021 tax returns. This was an increase into the income tax credit for children. One of the things that Romney is actually supportive of, and a lot of more kind of populist, quote unquote, Republicans that care about family and family formation and keeping families together and providing for them are actually in support of. Now, if we go ahead and do some basic math here, so that is from July. So July to December is 6 months. So that's $18,000. And then if we say that another income, so 30,000, we'll just assume that this amount of money here that is earned is from a 2-income household. So both people earn 34,500. So we're going to say 34,500 divided by, and we're going to say 6 months because it's a half a year. 34,500 divided by 6 is 5,750 a month. So you're getting almost halfway there, right? You're getting a little over halfway there with this $3,000 monthly payment. If you're a 2-income household making that much money, and you say you're a part-time worker, you're only making actually $20,000 a year, and your other partner makes $49,000 a year, what have you, which is a typical case in a 2-income household with kids, that because child care costs are as much as they are, it might be better for you to drop out of the workforce and actually just take care of your kids. This is only true for people that one person works what we would typically consider a middle class job, while the other person works a lower wage job in like retail or something. In those cases, it might be more beneficial for for the lower income person to drop out of the workforce, stay with their kids, and then just pocket this money. Now, would it be better for them to just work and save the money? Sure, maybe in raw economic terms, but we can't know what would be better for them and their in particular family situation. If this is something that actually proves to be true, this is going to put more pressure on wages in general as people drop out of the workforce, because they're able to stay at home with their kids and not have to work as much as they would normally due to having this access of income. This is essentially a UBI for people with kids. So I don't want to call it UBI. It's basically a basic income guarantee for people with kids. It can't be UBI because it's not universal. Not everybody has kids. So it's a basic income guarantee for people with kids. And this could be a fairly amazing and game changer thing that could end up being better for people in the country long term. Because if you have two people working all the time, making, just over minimum wage or what have you, and not being able to spend time with their kids and give that focus, that takes resources away from the kids and maybe makes it harder for them to make it to school or get the kind of care, need, and attention that they need simply due to poverty. So that is something that I think did need to be pointed out after I looked this up, and one of those things that the Republicans might have a point about. So I will give that concession to Republicans, but unlike them, I don't consider this a bad thing. The amount of people still looking for work and working is going up despite the existence of things like the extra bit of unemployment money, which Republican states have actually cut immensely, and the like, and that sort of thing. So yeah. But with that, I am sad to say that we are out of time. If you liked what you heard, and I know you did because you stayed with me to the end, go ahead and smash that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. It populates the videos across the internet better and lets people know that you like what you heard, and they will like it too. Just to reiterate again, we will be raising money for three charities from on July 31st to August 1st, 11 a.m. to 11 a.m. American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, Austin Pets Alive, and the Bob Woodruff Foundation, in order to support these communities, these charities rather, and do something good with our streaming for the benefit of others. So go ahead and check that out. We'll be streaming it live to Twitch and YouTube, and we have a ton of stuff planned. We have debate panels. I'll be playing some video games. I'll be doing a wrap up of Foreign Affairs magazine and talking and giving kind of the analysis on top of the analysis provided by Foreign Affairs, and just a whole host of stuff, open panels, and maybe even some entertainment from other people. So yeah, please check it out. Mark your calendars down. Tell your friends. It's going to be a good time, and it's going to be for good causes. So we hope to see you there on July 31st. And yes, also, just to reiterate, I am going to be doing more than just the news roundups going forward. So after the charity stream is over, I will be doing potentially 2 of these kind of streams a week. One being the news roundup, and another one being ad hoc, different things that I just want to talk about and entertainment, maybe even play some video games here and there, just to be able to build it up more. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. And also remember that every time that I'm live, you're more than welcome to join me on the program via our Discord server, and just join the Discord server, hop into one of the Discord voice channels, and I'll drag you in to the channel that I am streaming from right now, and you'll be able to talk and get your questions answered on air, and we can have a conversation. So please feel free to do that anytime that I'm on. More than welcome to come on. And as always, keep your head up through the political storm.